Good afternoon, Dean Chamberlain, faculty, friends, and loved ones. We are here today to celebrate the Western Law class of 2024. To my fellow students, thank you for allowing me the privilege to be here. To my family, thank you as well. I'll do my best not to embarrass you, although to be clear, that is an entirely non-binding commitment. As we've come to the end, I think it's worth recognizing that we've received so much invaluable encouragement and advice throughout our time here. And through countless lectures and addresses, from orientation until today, it seems like there's been a bit of a common thread. We've heard big, bold proclamations about the people in this room and the things we have in common. We've been told at various points that we're united by a shared responsibility, a love of scholarship, a comfort with hard work, and perhaps most accurately, a chronic need for the approval of others. But to all these important and inspirational comments, I'd like to add a caveat informed by a student's perspective of the Western Law experience. Our class is a little less cohesive than these statements suggest, and I think that's because we came here in search of starkly different things. For some in our cohort, law school may have been the realization of a lifelong goal, the opportunity to change careers, a COVID project that went a little too far, or an exercise in I'll figure it out later. So, these disparate goals or policy objectives for the faculty in the room were reflected throughout our time here. Some of us were captivated by the charter and found themselves in room 38 for long hours questioning whether an act of state power was minimally impairing. Others found themselves at Joe Cool's downtown, searching for something maximally impairing. Many of us strive to live both of these lives simultaneously, which I can assure you came at some cost to nutrition, sleep, and general well-being. In exams, some monitored the clock, others brought monitors in with them. Some controlled their stress, others aggressively control-F'd. Some of us found community in a club, a sport, or a project, some in a close group of equally neurotic friends. Others had jobs and personal commitments outside law school that demanded their attention or simply chose to spend the bulk of their time with loved ones instead. Some members of our class practically lived in the law building and relished any opportunity to bump into their colleagues around chambers. Others prayed for every possible off-camera Zoom lecture or regularly braved the 401 to make weekly commutes into London. None of our approaches to Western law were the same, but none was more valid than any other. We wanted different things, and our time here meant something a little different to each and every one of us. And that's not going to change. Our paths going forward will certainly be just as varied. Some in our cohort hope to use the law for social justice goals, others hope to pursue careers in business or academia. Many of us will even find ourselves outside the law altogether. To be clear, I meant in careers other than legal practice, not in sort of like a criminal way. But what I'm trying to say is, because of all this, because of our great variety of reasons for being here, the uniqueness of our experience here, and our plans for the future, it's a real challenge from a student's perspective to apply a unifying theme to a day like today. So here's the best I have. It is a privilege to graduate with all of you, but realistically, what unites us is not a great shared purpose or a common value set. It's simpler, more modest, and perhaps annoyingly obvious. What we all have in common is that this was really hard. We all did a hard thing. But today, that by itself is worth celebrating. Western law was hard for many reasons. And again, I'll start with the obvious. The well-documented hurdles that we discuss so often. Reading, exams, the bar. Over the last 3 years, you may have found yourself in a 15-minute virtual interview trying to convince a prospective employer that you're at once remarkable and also totally normal. Or making submissions in an actual proceeding on behalf of a student clinic, feeling very underqualified, but also keenly aware that these are real people's interests at stake. You may have found yourself wide awake in the early hours of the morning, frantically trying to print a summary before an exam. an experience I can confidently rate as 0 out of 100. Incidentally, 0 out of 100 might be well above average on Professor Seinell's grading scale. All of these things made this experience hard. But in addition, there were a whole bunch of other obstacles that we tend to discuss less often. For many of us, part of what made this experience hard was the constant worry and anxiousness surrounding every law school milestone. Before we even arrived, each of us spent a considerable amount of time trying to make today possible. Not just the procedure of applying, but time spent thinking and planning, managing the emotional ups and downs that go into choosing this undertaking. Should I go to law school? Can I go to law school? Okay, but more specifically, what percentage chance do I have? And when you get in, you're filled with elation and pride, but then you show up and a new set of doubts presents themselves. On your first day, you're shuttled into a classroom, in our case with 20 other masked people, and told to socialize. This would be your small group. And you're happy and excited to be there, but immediately your mind begins to question. Will these people like me? Did I just say something weird? I definitely did. When in fact, all you've just shared is your name and where you're from. I remember feeling these concerns so intensely that on my first day, after fracturing my collarbone playing touch football, I refused to wear the sling I was prescribed for fear that I would forever be identified as Sling Guy. But that's the sort of internal dialogue that continues during and in between each and every law school milestone. And it intensifies when things don't go well. Somehow every possible administrative burden seems to strike at exactly the wrong time. At some critical moment, the laundry machine breaks, the apartment has a pest problem, the dog needs to go to the vet. And to be clear, it's not that any of these stresses is so onerous by themselves. There are, of course, obviously, greater challenges that exist in the world. It's just that when a tide of little things go wrong, it can feel like this undertaking wasn't meant for you, like you somehow made the wrong choice. Because when this happens, you don't just question the circumstances in front of you, you tend to question yourself. Do I belong here? Am I good enough? Where do I see myself in 5 years? Do I really like this? Do I like this enough to do it for a living? To what extent does anybody really like anything? And regardless of whether you were able to resolve these questions in your mind or successfully chose to ignore them, the last 3 years demanded a constant energy and endurance to continuously litigate yourself at every major turn. And that, I think, also makes this experience hard. And if somehow internal dialogue never really weighed on you, there was almost certainly some moment outside of law school that did. You may have struggled to find your place in this community. You may have worked hard just to maintain your health or the relationships that matter to you. You may have been attacked by the wild geese that insist on policing our sidewalk. You may have come from out of province and felt the exhaustion of homesickness. Many of our colleagues experienced challenges in their personal lives that immeasurably magnified the difficulty of their journey. Learning challenges, chronic illness, financial uncertainty, loss. Our time here was not equally hard or even hard for the same reasons, but it was hard in some way for everyone in our class. What we're here to recognize is that each of us persisted. We made it here to today. Through a series of little choices to just do the best you could on that day, we ended up here. Each of us, regardless of how you spent your time here or didn't spend your time here, has earned the right to celebrate and all the joy that comes with it. And of course, we manage this not on our own, but with the help of somebody or something. In the course of the various bumps in the road, we can all remember the moments where we felt weak or exasperated, but were met with some source of external support. At times, it took the form of generosity, the professor who indulged hundreds of iterations of the exact same question, the classmate who shared their notes when you missed class, the parking attendant who took the day off the day you decided to drive. But more often, what made this possible was the regular presence of someone to lean on, the club or faith or community group that made you feel at home, a friend we could vent to and confide in, who helped us get home safe after a denning, who helped us troubleshoot Microsoft Word conversion issues, who provided really dumb jokes and laughter and fun and all the things that make this experience truly memorable. And this kind of support can only really be offered by somebody else who's also going through it, someone who gets it. I remember coming home from reading week in 2L and sharing with a childhood friend who wasn't in law school my interest in mooting and how excited I was about it. And he kind of just paused for a second and then went, "Aren't you a little old to be playing pretend?" I mean, probably, but that comment was less than helpful. But most of all, this help, it came from loved ones who made sacrifices to make this journey possible. Some of our colleagues have partners who moved from across the province to the country to support their journey, who tolerated irregular sleep schedules and obsessive discussions of grading curves and indices and all sorts of things foreign and annoying to someone outside of this environment. Parents or guardians that instilled drive and confidence and belief long before we arrived here. Or siblings or cousins who provided support and encouragement even where they didn't quite understand what it was we were doing. I have this distinct memory during COVID of my younger sister hopping on several hours-long silent Zoom calls just so I could simulate what it would be like to write a virtually proctored LSAT. We all have different memories like this that we can point to and say, that's where I was helped, that's where I caught a break, and that person or group of people helped me get here. So today we celebrate these contributions alongside our own, and while we can't exactly measure or fully account for this help, we can again, once more, say something really obvious but necessary. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, having taken 2 classes with Professor Nichols, I'm very conscious of time constraints, so I have just 3 short things left to say. First is that having done one hard thing, I hope future challenges appear a lot less daunting. If you could think back to the person who sat masked in an auditorium in September 2021, that person is likely quite different than the one sitting here today. After all that time and effort and emotional energy that went into this, we should now be equipped not just with a bit more legal knowledge, but with a lot more self-awareness and belief. It turns out that at least some large portion of the things we worried about turned out okay. Many of our obstacles were dealt with. The mistakes we made were not fatal. With the exception of the 5% LRWA case brief. That will follow you to the ends of the earth. You cannot outrun the case brief. But there will be difficult, unreasonable, and ridiculous challenges in our future. It may be a demanding client matter, the sheer horror of an improperly italicized comma, or it may just be the slow churn of a million frustrations in the course of everyday life. Endurance, belief, persistence, whatever, sometimes it feels a bit like an open book exam. You might not have it on the top of your brain, but you might be able to find it if you know where to look. Second, I hope we can continue to rely on each other as our careers progress, wherever that may be. If your own reserves are ever insufficient, somebody here will help. It might be unrealistic or inaccurate to say that you'll get a hold of each and every one of the 180 people sharing this moment with you, but someone will, and that's enough. We know this stuff because it's happened already. It happened here. So thirdly and finally, regardless of why we came here, what we did here, or what our plans are afterward, let's enjoy this moment and celebrate each other this evening to whatever level of impairment you prefer. Congratulations to the class of 2024 and those who helped us.